everybody out there. My name is Darren Moore. You're here at the Log Cabin Studios in Manhattan Center. I'm the chief engineer of this place, and it's a world-class facility where many hit records have been made. And as you see, it's kind of an old-style facility. It's a modern studio and a vintage room, we call it. We have a Neve VR here. It's a 72-channel console, but we do everything with Pro Tools. And Rue had an interesting question: how has technology changed the art of recording in New York City? Well, to take us back a little bit, primarily to answer that question, and I can easily say that it's created a bigger role for the DJ. And you want to go even further back, New York City was always a big home for urban music. And if you're talking about the late 70s, early 80s, you had funk bands playing music, but guys started DJing, started cutting up records, taking other people's records and making stuff with it. Wham, bam, flash forward to the future, you have actual DJs coming to studios now to make records with rappers, and they're bringing turntables and they're making their records, and they happen upon a new technology that was made for creating music. It's called the sampler. Back then we had the SP1200, we had the Lindrum, things like that, where you could take a little piece of a recording, just a tiny little piece of a recording, and put it in a machine and then trigger it with a key. And DJs loved this because it was actually made to be a rhythm composer. You can sample drum hits or percussion hits and program them to play back with a computer. But DJs really realized that they could take snippets of records, put them on keys, and build songs in segments from samples. The machines got better, the samplers got better, and everything happened. But at the time, it was still, you had to go to a big studio because you needed like 14 samplers to make a record. If you wanted to make a whole record, to make all those sounds, you needed a bunch of samplers. All that had to get printed to a tape machine through a console. All the EQ and processing was primarily in the studio. So even after the whole band phase in New York City of making records with rock bands and punk bands and funk bands and all those kind of bands, and Blondie and all these other groups and everything else, the studio was still a home for urban music production. Rappers would come, A&R people would come and hang out, record label people would be there, but primarily the producer, who probably evolved from a DJ position, going from different venues, supporting the artist by playing records and building tracks for them and mixtapes and everything else, now becomes the principal person in the studio, sort of the Quincy Jones of the urban music scene. He's picking the sounds, he's designing the records, he's making tracks for artists, LL Cool J, Run DMC. All these groups have their DJ and their DJs with them in the studio helping them make the records.
One of the things that stands out just now as you asked that question is the first time that I really used Pro Tools was while I was working on the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And up until that point, everything was done on tape. And the first session, real full-on session that happened at Sony Studios with a Pro Tools, with a big Pro Tools rig, one of the first ones was Lauryn. And when we were working on Everything Is Everything, we did some string overdubs and we did it all in Pro Tools, and then I came back later and edited them and moved them around. And at that time, it wasn't you had to have a Pro Tools operator, because it wasn't like everyone had Pro Tools. It was like this big deal, this big tower, and a guy that comes in and works with you. And I thought that was pretty cool, to see that we could come in and take, prior to that, it would have been locking up a bunch of tape, a bunch of reels to get that many tracks to play at the same time. So to come in with a machine and just hit a button and it was like all the strings were there, that was pretty, I remember that. That sticks out. I've been fortunate to have a lot of great mentors, not just on the musical side, but also on the technology side, as well as in studios. I was able to come up under engineers like Alan Gregory, who was a really prominent engineer in the 90s, Go Hotoda, Dave Way. These were guys, Bob Claremountain, that we sat and where we learned from. Roger Nichols, when we were coming up in interns. So now a lot of interning in studios. So now a lot of, techniques that I developed later, I have to say I have to give it to, all of our teachers. And our teachers were musical. Like, we were trained in the art of hip hop and the battle just as much as we were trained in, musical expression and theory and recording that. And so we hold both in high esteem. We don't place one over the other. It's all expression, and I think that's also what's kind of like a tying theme in some of the projects that I work on that I have worked on, where we kind of blend, we blend the parts. Also, studio, if you think about the space where people come together to record, as we were talking about earlier, if you had to record 10 people in a room, I mean, that's you have to have a space that could physically house those people. You have to, that place has to be air conditioned. That place has to be comfortable. That place also has to have power and all these different things that, are required in just having a space. When you look at Manhattan, midtown, you know what real estate costs are like here. And if budgets aren't the same at record companies, because everything is sort of getting smaller since technology has made it so that, okay, you don't need 10 people, you need a laptop. So a label might feel like, well, why does a record need to cost what it cost before? So all of those things play a role in it. But I also think that, the business kind of overextended itself. So there were things that, if you think about how the business started, it was all live music and it was all recording studios, and no one was selling music not like then, like they sold, in the 80s and the 90s. So the expense of it also increased, and I think that's what really, killed it, because it wasn't like a band ever became obsolete. It was just the environments now, no one could afford them. I think a lot of them are going back to the beginning. They're doing it, in their neighbor's house, in the garage. I think they're doing it in their rooms, because they have more tools now. The technology has now given them the ability to do certain things in a smaller room, like maybe right in their, like I said, right in their bedroom. Now 3 or 4 people getting together to play, it's not the same as it was before. So, you could still see that happening. And I think that that's also that's not to say it's all the gloom and doom on technology, that it just killed the music. It's not that. It's just different. I think it's about, being able to empower yourself. And it's allowed, people that maybe didn't have the opportunity before, the ability to empower themselves, because it gives them access, that you don't need certain things. So now anywhere could be a studio.
So the laptop has changed the world. But still, when it comes to recording live instruments or working with musicians such as drummers, piano players, guitar players, and everything else, we still come to the studio. And now in New York, there is a resurgence of musicians playing music, and it is not to separate from the people with the laptops creating electronica and doing EDM and everything else, but now actually it's sort of synergizing and homogenizing and coming together. And bands are playing with DJs, and DJs are performing live sets with artists, including instrumentalists and stuff, and they're trying to capture that vibe and work in that mode. Now, so the relevance of the studio is always the place where the creative mindset comes to collaborate and work together. We try to have the highest quality equipment, the highest quality sound, the best vibe, the best of everything. So to add to that, we have a facility here where we have multiple computers. We have a Pro Tool system, main one, and then we also have stations where a producer can come and plug in their equipment, their laptop, their PC, their tower, wherever the case may be, and play their records or design their records listening through the big speakers in a space like this. It also allows his ability, while he's doing this, to record a drummer or instrumentalist or a vocalist or a choir, string section, or whatever it may be. And then also, what's happening now is these groups are coming to studios that are set up like this with live rooms, so that they can record live instruments, and then they can bring the actual project home or to a smaller project studio where they have a laptop or something and other audio interfaces and do vocal takes and all that kind of stuff from another facility. And then, yes, they can email it to their mixer who's in California, who works out of a big studio down in Hollywood, and he can do all the mixes and talk with them with Skype and send all the project back so that they can release their records and work with the best people in the world. So it's kind of opened up the floodgates to creativity, but it has created a situation where people can produce their projects all over the place and don't have to really come to the studio. But coming to the studio to collaborate has always been an important part of making music. And
you get what you pay for. I think, there's, you can't spend $5,000 for a microphone and then spend $150 for a microphone and think they're the same thing. Now, do they both work? Yeah, they both work. Can they get the job done? Yes, they can get the job done. But is there a difference? Absolutely, there's a difference. And if you understand what that $5,000 microphone does and what it's for, then you can appreciate its cost or the cost to use it. With everything, I think, just art in general, as we were talking earlier about art, if you use it as a substitute, I think then now that's when you lose something. If you use it as a help, it's a helper. It can help you extend your art. That's different. That doesn't, it's like no one wants to practice anymore. So, there's a whole thing of instant gratification because you can hit a button and something happens like that. Whereas before, you couldn't do that. So now in the work of having to do something, your skill gets increased. Like with anything, it's like pushing a weight, your muscle increase. But if you just take a pill to give you muscles and you never use the muscle, at a certain point, you're going to see the difference. And that's what I think it is in the music. And those people who were fortunate or blessed to be able to have teachers like that or to able to be around places. I mean, for me, that's why I would come back to a place like this, because I know the value of it. So it's like a lost gem. It's like when I saw Darren and saw that the place, what they were doing and they were getting things going and getting here and the board was here and it was working and the speakers were here. I'm like, wow, these people are really putting an investment into music. That to me was something that, how do you let go of that? Because I know the value of it and I appreciate anybody that would be interested in even doing that, because that to me tells me that they're serious about music, and we want to be around people that are serious about music.